This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. This is the Journey Step-by-Step Christian Podcast, and I am your host, also the editor, also the everything producer, yada, 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 Karen Beach. I'm your host. So welcome to the Journey Step-by-Step Christian Podcast, and I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're listening. And today's show is going to be kind of difficult for me. A lot of times when you talk to atheists and people that don't share the faith, they always have the same question, and they ask, why does God let things happen? Bad things happen. Where is he when bad things happen? And today's guest, Rene Michele, is here to talk about a horrific issue, and that's childhood sexual abuse. And a lot of times when people say, well, why would God let something like that happen? What do you say? What do you say when someone is completely robbed of their innocence by something that can only be described as evil? What do you say? What do you do? Well, in talking to Rene, I think she has a good approach to answering that question. God doesn't make it happen. He doesn't allow it to happen, but he gives us the resources we need to get through it. So without any further ado, I don't want to talk for Rene. Rene's completely capable of talking for herself. So Rene Michele, welcome to the journey.
Thank you so much, Karen. It's an absolute privilege to be here and talking to your audience today.
I appreciate it. And this is one of those issues that, is difficult all the way around. It's not an easy thing to deal with, because what you've been through is so horrific. And the best way to describe it, from my point of view anyway, is evil. So can you just give give the audience a little bit of background about your story?
Sure. So from around the age 10, Karen, is when my abuse started. And the way that came into my life was through a family trauma, where my family basically imploded from the inside out. And I grew up in very small country towns, and the way that we dealt with drama and trauma and things that weren't pleasant back in the 70s here in Australia was to sweep it under the carpet and pretend that it didn't exist. And unfortunately, my mother's way of coping was to not cope with what was happening, and she developed a drinking problem. My father was no longer in the home, and the men that she brought into our home started abusing me. First, it was physical abuse while she wasn't around, and then that turned into sexual abuse. And I suffered at the hands of multiple men in my own home for at least another decade. And I did not speak up about my abuse. My family system was completely depleted, and the mental health lines and so on that we have today. So I suffered in silence and kept that hidden. And as we know, when we do experience trauma, our ability to cope with that, particularly at such a young age, is not there.
Exactly. It's not there. We don't have the tools. I know a lot of times when people get a little bit older than you, people think, well, why didn't they do something? Why didn't they say something? But your whole demeanor, you're not mentally at a point where you can deal with that. Like here, a big thing is we have a singer, R. Kelly, who was videotaped over a decade ago urinating on a 14-year-old girl. And what was scary, I'm about to sneeze. I'm sorry. I've developed allergies like overnight. But anyway, when it comes to R. Kelly, the thing is that he urinated on a 14-year-old girl. And what was appalling to me, absolutely appalling, is that when it happened, nobody did anything. And when it happened, so many women who you would think would know better blamed the 14-year-old girl. Well, she was fast. She did this. She did that. And it's like, no, she's a 14-year-old girl. And if you remember being 14, you weren't as mature as you are now. You know, I mean, you're just not there. And I think too, and correct me if I'm wrong, when you suffer from something like this, it makes that maturing process that much more difficult.
Mm. And you're robbed of your cognitive ability to think clearly and to process pressure. So anytime anything happens to you that is significant, that requires a lot of focus and control, you don't have the ability, the cognitive ability, because your brain, and this is the part that I teach all my women in my coaching programs, is the effect of trauma on the brain. Your brain chemistry changes. It's scientifically supported by so much data today. And this is something that we need to get better at teaching survivors. And this whole, that story, victim blaming and shaming, that keeps us silent. Anytime I tried to talk about my abuse, even just a glimpse of my story, I would be shot down in flames, ridiculed, met with shame and judgment. So it kept me silent until I was 26 years old, Karen. So I suffered in silence the majority of my life. And we have to change that. It's unacceptable.
So I know your faith is important to you, and your faith was critical in you kind of overcoming this situation. So how did your faith play a role in that?
My faith, discovering Christ at 26 and his love for me, was the absolute starting point, the pivotal moment of my life when I was able to start healing from the inside out. Because until I learned who my identity was in his eyes, my words around my identity was disgusting, naughty, unlovable, unworthy, all those negative connotations that just make us feel so unworthy. And I felt so unworthy, I attempted to take my life on 2 separate occasions. Yet when I came face to face with who God says I was, then I had a roadmap for how to claw my way out of the dirt and, like you said, the evil that had been done to me. Then I had hope that the message of Christ and his redemption and his ability to restore and make us clean and whole, I can hand on heart, Karen, say I would not be alive today.
Wow. And what was that moment like? I mean, describe how you came to feel that love from Christ.
I walked into a church at age 26, and the reason I walked into a church that day was I had just given birth to my baby girl. And I looked down at her and I just refused in that moment. It was like an epiphany. It was like, she will not endure what I endured. And I was willing to do whatever it was going to take to change my life. And I opened the phone book of all things and walked into my local church that morning. And the message that day was female survivors of child abuse on the platform, speaking from a place of healing, empowerment, and overcoming. They spoke from a place of victory. And never before had I heard abuse spoken about from a place of empowerment. And people were applauding and crying. And all of a sudden I realized that maybe this thing that I had hidden wasn't as shameful and disgusting as I thought it was. And maybe it just was something that I could overcome. It gave me hope that I had never been given before. And that's when I put my hand up. I received Christ that day, and I have never turned back.
You know, and it says something about Christ, the fact that you showed up in that church on that day.
Correct.
You know, a lot of people would say, oh, well, that's coincidence. But there is no coincidence. Because I used to have a bad habit of saying, well, something told me to do this or something told me to do that. And it was a lady at my Bible study one day that said, you know what that something is, don't you?
Exactly.
And I was like, I never thought of it that way. But it's true. It's that still small voice that leads you to your proper place, to where you need to be. And, I think, when you ask that question, or when I asked that question earlier, why does God let things happen? It's not that he lets things happen, but that's the world we live in.
Correct. And this is the beautiful thing about our God, when you actually do become aware of his presence and his adoring love for you, his infinite adoration for who we are. God did not make those things happen. He didn't even allow those things to happen. What he did do was give me the resources, the heart, the strength, the tenacity to never, ever give up, to constantly search him out, which led to me walking into that church that day. And then when I did discover him, he put the people in my life that taught me, that mentored me. He gave me, the most amazing children who have supported my journey, opened doors for me. Here is a young girl that was robbed of her voice and innocence, as you said earlier, now speaking on stages and coaching women and being a voice. So the one thing that was stolen from me, he has now blessed and empowered to be the thing that leads other women to Christ and to freedom.
And sometimes I think, and this might seem kind of callous, but sometimes I think that's why certain things happen to some people, so that we can be the testimony, so that we can lead other people to find that answer.
I think he just always provides a way. We know the word. We know that it says he'll never give us too much that we can't handle. He'll always give us a way out. But this is where personal choice comes in. And often we ridicule personal choice and we reduce it. But as a child, I didn't have a choice about what happened to me. But as soon as I was given the tools to get out of it, I was given the choice of how I dealt with it. I was given the choice. Now, it wasn't easy, and it took me another 16 years to heal and to come out the other side, but it was still a choice. I was still given the tools, and then it was up to me whether I applied them to my life and did the hard work, or whether or not I buried my head in the sand. So I believe that, yes, we can go through something terrible, but with the right people, with the right help, and facing our fears, we can absolutely, particularly when Christ is our source, we can overcome anything.
And it's something you just said. It took, even after you got the help and the people that you needed, it still took you 16 years of hard work to get through it. And I think that's another thing that people sort of, especially people on the outside, get wrong. It's not like there's this blinding light and all of a sudden everything is right. You still have to put in the work. You still have to work darn hard to get from A to B. It's not a straight line. There are hills, there are valleys, there are turns and detours, and you have to be committed to do your part.
And that's where the beauty is. That's where the learning is. That's where we get to get really up and close with God's love. If he just clicked his fingers the moment we said yes to him, okay, we've arrived and everything's wonderful. Where is the power and testimony in that, either for ourselves or for him? That is not where the power is. The power is understanding, right, now I have like a GPS for my life, but I still have to follow. And in those times when I make a mistake or I go backwards, that's okay. I just turn that thing back on. He's waiting there for me, and I get to keep going. If there would be no, I guess, inspiration for others who are struggling. If I said, hey, I just walked into a building one day and everything, all the lights just came on and I've arrived now and everything's wonderful. There's no power in that. There's no transformation in that. You have to show people that you were once where they were, meet them where they're at, and give them the tools for all those roadblocks and barriers that they too are going to encounter.
And that too, he gave you the help for that. because there are people in your life that were there when you hit those puddles and those rocky patches and those valleys. He gave you the people to kind of help you get through that. So, you're never alone. You got to still do the hard work, but you're never alone. He's there. The Lord is there, of course, but he also puts people in your life that can help you.
He does. He certainly does. He's a gentleman. It's not him that walks away. If we go through something hard and we struggle, I know that I temporarily walked away from him. And when I say walked away, I guess I felt defeated, and I was still very immature and very young, infancy stages of my Christian walk. And I would get overcome by that shame again, which is absolutely debilitating for an abuse survivor, particularly someone who, as in my case, was abused from the age of 10. My reaction was to freeze. So that freeze response for survivors of trauma brings an added layer of shame, because we don't understand why we did that. Why didn't we fight, run, scream, lash out? So again, that understanding that fundamental reaction to how our body responds to trauma is instrumental for people to heal. And so I would walk away for a moment and feel bad about myself, but I would feel a nudge, or somebody would come and talk to me, and it was always Christ just getting close to me again and saying, "Hey girl, I'm here for you. Come on, we're going to do this together." And it was such a gentle, loving way that he did that. And that's who Christ is. He is our Heavenly Father. He loves and adores us, and he will chase us down no matter what it takes, I have found.
That's true. He's always there, but he's not always in the forefront. We have to seek him out. We have to look for him. And when we find him, there he is. He's always there, but we have to make an attempt to go after him. Now, another thing that I want to talk about is, what role, if any, does forgiveness play in this?
Look, for each of us, it is very, very different. Now, when I say it's different, forgiveness for me, I never had an issue or a real challenge forgiving, and I don't know why, because all of us, we heal differently and we process the events that happen to us differently. But I never really got stuck on the points of struggling to forgive the strangers that hurt me. I was sort of able to put them out of my mind, and while they still gave me nightmares and flashbacks, forgiveness was never really an issue. The hard parts when it came to forgiveness was on the behalf of my family members who basically neglected me and didn't take on their role as, the proper caregiver and person that was supposed to protect me above all else. They were the ones that I struggled to forgive, because in my mind it was like, why didn't you love me enough to go through the process of understanding, not to actually put the responsibility on them, because the past is the past. I can't change that. What I had to do was go through the motions of releasing them and saying, okay, that hurt, but I can't change the past. What I can change is the future. I refused to hold on to that because it just limited my potential. It just pulled me down. So I was the one suffering, not them. So if I was trying to get over all this trauma, why would I continue to hold on to the parts that still kept me trapped in the past? So I had to learn to let go. But the biggest person I had to learn to forgive was myself. I had so much self-loathing that I had heaped upon myself. I hated my reflection. I wouldn't look in mirrors. I self-harmed for many, many years, cutting and so forth. And I just did not like who I was. And that's why I say, when I started learning who my identity was in Christ, that's when I started to soften. My heart really began to soften towards myself. And I worked through that self-forgiveness, which again is an absolute key area for survivors to work through with their healing.
When you said you started to realize who you were in Christ, who did Christ reveal himself to you to be? Who is he to you?
Who he is to me is And because I have such an adoration and an all-consuming love for my children, a love that I never thought I would experience, because I know that that is not how my parents loved me. So I was never shown or role modeled or felt a love as immense as what I have for my children. So when I started to explore who Christ was in the Bible, the role that most spoke to me was him as my Abba Father. That's what I related to, because me and the way that I loved my children, that's when I started to actually, fall in love with him as a daughter and go, oh my goodness, the love that you have for me, the hope you have for me, the life you want me to have. Jeremiah 29:11 became my absolutely all-consuming verse. The hope in the future he has for us, not harm. He doesn't want to bring us harm. He has nothing but prosperity and goodness for us. That really became my overarching verse. And he became my source, my provider, my shield, my father. Every pure and good thing that I could imagine the world to be was all in him, and then some. And then I learned that he saw me as pure, as white as snow, as righteous as his bride, as his daughter. All these beautiful words that I looked at my beautiful, little children to be. And that's when my heart just swelled for him. When I transferred it to the way that I felt about my children, that gave me a really clear glimpse into who he was as my Heavenly Father.
And it's funny the way that happens, the way that can't happen when you're still a child. You know what I mean? You have to be older to come to that realization. And I don't have kids, but I know I lost my mom when I was 15. And I carried guilt that, as a 15-year-old, you're sort of a jerk to your parents.
Aren't we just?
And, it took me being about 35. And then God told me, he said, your mom knew you were 15. Your mom used to be a 15-year-old girl. So she knew what you were. She didn't hold anything against you, because I've been carrying this guilt in my heart. And it's true. When you have parents, when you get to a certain point, even if you don't have kids, you get to a point where you kind of can look back at things from a different perspective.
You do. You get a different perspective that, until you've been placed in that position, you will never have. And again, I think that's another blessing that he gives us, is the way that we see the world. When we're operating, and this is the hard thing for non-believers to understand, and I get that. But when you're operating every day with his love within you, with the Holy Spirit guiding you, you are given this capacity, this outlook, this perspective that you just don't have normally, because it allows you to see why things happen, who he is, why these things are in our world, and the process of seasons and highs and lows. And like I said, it really, for me, really was a blueprint, like a GPS for my life. And I know I don't ever have to reach a point in my life ever again where I feel so utterly, caught in despair and lost and in pain. I'm constantly given tools, strategies, and if I feel lost and alone, the comfort of his word that I can lean on. Because, we all get points where we feel overwhelmed, where things come at us from left side that just blow us, over, and we think, God, why is this happening? I'm doing everything right for you and I love you. Well, do you know why it happens? Because the world is the world. We live in a fallen world, and we need to understand now more than ever, as things escalate and we're seeing things happen all over the world, that our source is the same. Our shield is the same. The person that we have on our side is the same, and the battle has already been won. We just have to take on our part, do what we can in the natural, and let him meet us with his supernatural, and do it together day by day.
And I think that's so important, what you said, is that you don't ever reach a point in your walk where you've arrived at your destination. That's why my podcast is called The Journey. That's why my blog is called A Faith Walk, because you're always walking. It's not like it's a marathon and at some point you're going to get to the end. Your whole life, you're going to be on that walk. And at any time, you might get bad health news. Something, you might lose a job, you might lose a spouse or someone, but you're always going to be going up against something. But as your faith matures, hopefully you learn more about how to rely on God. That doesn't mean that you're never going to be upset or you're never going to be discouraged, but you get to a point where you realize you're not alone.
And that you are not alone message is life-saving. Often I speak on podcasts and the host may say at the end, Rene, is there just one thing that you'd like to share with the audience? And it's always, honey, you're not alone. No matter what you're going through or no matter what you've been through, there are people there who love you. And this is particularly aimed at non-believers. Okay, they haven't reached the point yet where they know that Christ is there, but there are people there to help you. We're not alone. We don't have to do this journey alone. And I love the name of your podcast. And it was something I was very much drawn to, Karen. I thought, yes, this is exactly the way that life is. It is a journey and we're on it together.
Yeah. And like, if you're walking any length of time, eventually it's going to rain. Depending on where you are, yes. It might snow, but let's not go there. I moved away from the snow. But you're always going to have those ups and downs, those hills and those valleys. And you becoming a Christian doesn't make you immune from that.
No, and it's those valleys that I know in myself is where I get stronger in God, because, we're still human and our flesh is still very, I want this and I want this now and I want this as easy as possible, because we are fleshly people. That's how we're wired and God knows that. And I recently had a crisis as little as 2 weeks ago where I had a very real potential situation came up where I could have been homeless, my children and I, where our place was sold from under us. And I have just written a book. So all of my finances have gone into publishing, having my book published. And I literally had no savings, Karen, nothing. And I was like, I don't know what's going to happen. So I turned my cupboard into a war room and I got down on my knees. And in the moment when I got the news, I did cry. I did go through that moment of, no, why is this happening? But then I went into action mode. Then I leant on who I knew was the person I needed to lean on, which was Christ. He knew the situation. He knew what was going on. No amount of crying or, crying out, why me, was going to fix it. I got down on my knees and for 24 hours I prayed, I worshipped, and I left it in his hands. And the very next day, everything was sorted out. I had a great friend ring me up saying, hey, a friend of mine's willing to rent out his little granny flat. It's brand new. He'll cover all your bills until you get on your feet. Off you go. Now, wow. I could have stayed in panic mode or I could have gone into war mode, and that's what I did. And that's the great thing about when we do walk with him. We always have the tools and he's always waiting there just going, come on, honey. Sometimes we just need a reminder, I think, and that's where those valleys are instrumental in our growth and our journey.
Yeah, I'll share with you. I'm still in a valley, but it's okay because I've been out of work for a while and then I was woefully underemployed. I mean, making what I made 15 years ago, underemployed. Wow. Of course, I've had 15 years of increasing expenses, so that wasn't that great. But I finally, and it was nothing but God. I found a job. I was like, Lord, every door I thought was going to be open closed. And so finally I'm like, Lord, it's up to you. Wherever you want me to be. And he led me to a job where I'm making 50% more than what I made in my last job.
Wow.
My last full-time job.
Yeah.
And I thought, I've arrived. Then, I paid off some bills, I paid them ahead of time, and I woke up and I looked at my checking account, and this was 2 Fridays ago, and my check was half of what it should have been because I messed up my timesheet. And I was like, okay, but I'd already paid all these bills. So I ended up being like $200 overdrawn. So I get up, and what little money I have, I said, I'm going to go to the movies. I just need a moment. I go to the movies, and I'm like, what is that noise? Why does it sound like there's water running? Well, that's because my 4-year-old water heater had cracked. So I did, and I went through the whole thing like, you did, why me? Why does this have to happen? Yep. And I'm not going to have any money till the 30th. But, after my pity party, I really thought about it. And I have a friend that lives around the corner. She lets me take hot showers at her house. I've taken some cold showers on my own, and I'm like, but for me, it didn't happen any faster, but he enabled me to change the way I was looking at it. Instead of sulking and being like, why me? I was like, Lord, thank you for Bev, that she lives around the corner and I can take a bath at her house. Thank you for, making me able to endure cold water at the rate that I am.
Gratefulness.
And so that, and thank you for the fact that on the 30th, I will have money to get a decent hot water heater. So it's about praising him where you can from what you have, and, taking it from there. It's not like I prayed and all of a sudden the next day I had a brand new water heater in my garage. No, that didn't happen, but that doesn't mean that God wasn't involved in it.
And the other thing is too, Karen, when these things like this happen to me, I have to really see things as they are. And I ask myself a series of questions every time. Rene, has God ever let you down? Have you ever been, to the point where you believe that God is going to have you sitting on a street corner with your 2 children? No. And I look back at where I've come from, and I think, Rene, you have been through and overcome so much more than this in your life. Why have you allowed this thing to reduce you back to someone who has no power, is defenseless, is woe is me, and go back to that victim mentality, which I've always fought so hard against? And that's why my book is called Battle Scars Are Beautiful, From Victim to Victory. Because if we stay in that place of victimhood, where that robs us of our power. And for abuse victims, we've been robbed of our power long enough. So why would I allow myself, or even contemplate for one moment, going back to that place of disempowerment? No. Don't do that. And sometimes you just need to kick yourself up the bottom, I think, and just go, hang on, girl, what are you doing? Wake up to yourself here, get back on your feet, keep moving forward.
And that's what those people that God put in your life are there for, to help you get back up and get back on track, because it's so easy to and it's so tempting to wallow and to be that victim. It's very tempting, and there are a lot of people that will encourage you. Of course, this is terrible. We're not saying it's not terrible, but you don't want to stay in that terrible place.
That's right. And it all begins with the mind. Mindset is massive. Mindset, you know what it's like, Karen. You can defeat your entire day before your feet have even hit the carpet in the morning.
Yes,
that alarm goes off, and you can basically go, no, this day is going to be terrible, and I'm tired, and I don't want to get up, and it just runs like a hamster on a wheel from that moment onwards. The moment, that we allow our mind to take over, we've lost that battle. So we have to get very, very good at controlling our thoughts. And that was something that, I definitely had to do. And it's an instrumental part of my coaching programs, is really learning to master the mind. That is in our control. And you've got to start getting better at going, hang on, I refuse to have that thought. And for us as Christians, hang on, that is not a thought from God. Take every thought captive and keep it under the word of Christ. Is that what God says? No, it's not. Well, rein that thought in, baby, because that's not going to help you. And we just have to, again, put on that armor of God, stand in his word, defend ourselves, because, this is a fight that we're in. We know that. So we need to walk it out, be dutiful soldiers, and, sometimes we just got to cop it on the chin. But that's what makes us warriors. That's what makes us stronger. If everything was handed to us on a platter, God knows that that's not going to equip us. So he won't allow that to happen. He's not just going to give us the keys to the castle every time, because that's what makes us weak and selfish. And then we lose our humility and dependence on him. So it actually hurts us more. And he knows that. And that's the beauty of having someone like God who knows what's best for us all of the time.
All of the time. And, like you said, it's, we encounter things, we go through things because we have to rely on him. If every time you snapped your fingers, you got what you wanted, it would be easy to think that it had something to do with you.
Oh, yeah.
And that you did it all. But, God has a way of showing you, no, I did this. And, when you give him credit for that, it's not like, like my job situation. I'm perfectly aligned for this job. This job is going to be perfect for me. I can do this. I can do that. And I'd have great interviews, and then I get that thanks but no thanks email. And I'd be like, what the heck? And then finally I thought, you know what, Lord, you know what's best for me. You know where I need to be better than I do. Because the analogy I use is like, let's say you're in a hotel room you've never been in before. They have those good light canceling curtains. And you have to go to the bathroom. You're pretty much going to be hitting things as you walk to the bathroom. But God forgot that light is on. He can see everything in that room with stunning clarity. And we have to trust him to do that. The job I have, I didn't even apply for. Wow. They called me and said, hey, we found you on LinkedIn. Why don't you come in? And I came in for an interview and already had the job.
Wow.
He's like, this is who you're going to be working with. This is what you're going to be doing. And I literally sat in my car when I left and was like, did I just get that job? I mean, literally. But it was not something, there's no way that I could say, I did this, Karen Beach did this on her own volition. It's because I'm so great at my job that I got this. That I cannot say that. And I think a lot of times things happen the way they do, so that God can show us, hey, I did this. Exactly. I am worthy to be praised, and not, I've created you to be a great person, but guess what? I'm still in control.
And thank God that he is, because we don't know what we're doing. I mean, we've proven that to ourselves many a time, that we really are nothing without him. We'd just be wandering around aimlessly. And that is the beauty of being a Christian. It's not all of a sudden that we get to switch our mind off and we're these mindless robots that just says, all right, God, do with me what you will. No. And that's the beauty of free will. See, people can look at free will as something that's a bad thing. Why did these things happen to you? Oh, because it's, we've got free will. Well, that's such a terrible thing. Well, is it really? Because if we were just mindless robots and everybody just loved God without any reason, and we did that because, we didn't ever have to come against hardship, that doesn't sound like a great life to me. So as humans, we really wanted our own way all the time. Yet when we did get it our own way, which is, I want to have some say in my life here, now all of a sudden we can fall into that danger zone of then going, oh yes, but it's God's fault that so-and-so decided to do that to me. We can't have it both ways, you know, and the way that we do have it is amazing, because he says, all right, I'll give you what you want. I'll give you free will, but how about I also give you the Holy Spirit and my word that you can have with you every single day, my unlimited power and love and everything that you need to sustain life and live your life abundantly. How about I give you all that as well, so that at least you're armed to do life? I mean, does it get any better than that?
No, it does not. And it's, and people like you, people like, you know, I guess me with this podcast can help other people come to Christ. Just like when you were in that church, you were in that church when you were 26. And it was the exact right time. It was, you had people on the stage that could relate to what you've been through, who were on the other side. And because of that, it enabled you to recognize God's love and God's power. And, you know, now you're in a position to do that for other people.
And that's why I love that. I always say that the power of storytelling is very transformational, because if those people had not embraced their story and spoken from a place of such courage and bravery and joy, then that is something that, I mean, who knows how many more years I would have gone through my journey silent and not sharing and not believing that I was able to heal from that. And that's why now I sing my story from the mountaintops. I've dealt with my stuff. There is no pain attached to what I've been through anymore. So I very much use that story in the hope that, you know, it will reach the people that are just clinging on by their fingernails and just need someone to say, honey, you can do it. I've done it. It's okay. There is hope for you. You're not alone. Because we just don't know who's listening, who's watching. We all need that person to go before us to give us that glimmer of hope that, yes, I can do this too. If she did it, I can do it. And that pushes them to go that one more day, that one more step, and try that one more time. You know, and sometimes that's all we need, is just that one more step towards the life we're trying so desperately to believe is possible.
So tell me again about your book.
Okay, my book's called Battle Scars Are Beautiful, From Victim to Victory, and it's my memoir. It starts at that, you know, just before that age of 10, and it tells the story of not only what I went through, but the last 3 chapters, Karen, are called Victory Keys, and I've dedicated those last 3 chapters to how I did it. What did I implement in my life? What were the strategies and the tools and those daily tips of success that I applied to my everyday walk? And it really does, like you said, tell the story of my journey of healing. Took 16 years. I was trapped in a very bad marriage. I was still going through abuse in many different forms as a result of the fact that I was still trying to rebuild my own identity and who I thought I was and my place of self-worth. It also has stories in the end of contributions from other overcomers who themselves have, you know, in one way or another been able to heal from things like abuse, anorexia. It was always the message to be able to reach someone no matter what stage of life you're at. Some of the overcomers that have contributed are in their 60s, some are in their 20s. So it really is a story to tell people, no matter where you are, no matter what your age, no matter what your experience, if you've been through something hard, you can get through it. And this is how I did it and how other people have done that. So it's a message of hope. It's a message of you can do this.
Wow. Now, if you're listening, you can find a link to the book in the show description. And Rene, thank you so much for coming by. This has been a great discussion. It really has been. So my prayer is that we touch a lot of people with this.
Yes, mine too. Thank you so much for having me, Karen. And thanks everybody for listening.
All right. Well, I'm going to end the show, and I will tell you that until next time, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, because the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Until next time.